Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar presented by Vertesia and MarTech. It's called Unlock Your Dam, Fuel Your Creative Process with Generative AI. I'm Konstantin von Hoffman, Managing Editor at MarTech. Before we get started, here are a few viewing tips. If you have any audio issues, you can click the audio icon on your screen. If you have any viewing issues, you can use the Q&A section to communicate with us. You can send questions and community comments directly to the speaker about his presentation today. At any time, not today. Joining us today are Chris McLaughlin, Chief Marketing Officer at Vertesia, and Mary Kaplan, Director of Product Marketing at Vertesia. Welcome, Chris and Mary. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to hearing this. I'll turn things over to you now.
Good morning. Wonderful. Thank you, Con. Appreciate the kind introduction, and welcome everyone, as Con said, to our webinar. We are going to be talking about fueling your creative processes with generative AI, and particularly focusing in on use cases around digital asset management. Now, this is my favorite kind of webinar, and hopefully yours too, in that it's not just going to be me talking and going through slides. I am going to do a little setup and talk about some of the concepts and use cases, but I'm going to hand off to Mary in between. We're going to kind of intersperse some live demos here and show you the technology in action. And what I wanted to emphasize is that this is real technology. These are use cases that have come to us from our customers, and they're actively in production today. So not just concepts or science fiction, but actual real digital asset management use cases using generative AI. Just 2 seconds on Vertesia, so you know who's talking to you as we go into the webinar. We are a generative AI platform. Right? The goal of our technology is to make it easy for customers to build and deploy generative AI applications and agents. We were founded by the company that also built, or the team that also built Nuxio, which was an enterprise digital asset management solution. So kind of collectively, one, we do this every day, and two, we bring dozens of years working with digital assets, digital asset management technology. So hopefully we've got some good information to share with you today. Before I dive in, just wanted to spend a little bit of time on traditional digital asset management challenges. And there's not going to be anything earth-shattering or new here. This is a survey that Cloudinary sponsored with CMO Technology, a publication in the UK about 5 or 6 months ago, right? And traditional digital asset management challenges. First and foremost, do I have enough resources to effectively manage assets? Do I have a good process for managing asset variations? And sorry, this didn't render particularly well. What is my process like, and can I effectively manage my process for requests and feedback on assets? And ultimately, as with all kind of digital asset processes, right, it's about the timely delivery and deployment of assets. The two on the right that are in blue are related to working with creative agencies, right? So it's about managing multiple formats for assets and ultimately ensuring asset quality. So some pretty traditional and consistent, and the kind of challenges that we've seen for many, many years working with digital asset management. Now, the other thing that came out of this survey, about 2/3 of the respondents talked about expectations around increased use of visual formats, digital assets. So that's images, short form videos. Even more than 40% of respondents talked about 3D content. And as the scale and scope of these assets increases, so too do the challenges that we're talking about on the right-hand side of the slide. Now, the good news on this slide and on the previous slide is that these are areas where generative AI can help. So similar type of survey, top 5 areas of improvement. This one's from IDC. It's from September of 2024. A little confusing from a titling standpoint, right? Because we're talking about top 5 areas of improvement. That was a question posed to the respondents. And these are the 10 top responses that they got back across the respondent group. So again, traditional challenges with digital asset management, asset security, lot of demand for AI, Gen AI features, make it easier to create and edit assets, improve reporting analytics, storage, archival, so on and so forth. And what I did here kind of in the purple was illustrate some of the use cases where we see real benefits from generative AI, and also some of the use cases that we're going to be talking about and even demoing as we go through today. So we'll talk about using generative AI for asset creation and for editing localization of assets. We'll talk about speeding that ingestion process, how we do asset tagging, metadata enrichment, improve and streamline and automate that capture process. And then we can also talk about the importance of search technologies, right? How that impacts things like sanitation, deduplication, and how you can effectively manage storage and archival related to assets based on that information. And also how you can employ digital rights in different searches to ensure that you're only working with assets that are and should be accessible to you. So I'm going to start with a super simple use case. And before you jump off the webinar and say, hey, I've seen this before, we're going to talk about how we make this more product specific in a second. But a great example here, and you're going to see throughout my presentation as well as Mary's demos, that we've used publicly available images from Ford related to their different vehicles, and in particular the Ford Bronco. So what I did is I took this source image, I loaded it into ChatGPT, and I asked it for a description. And you can see that it does a really good job of describing the image in the picture, right? Image of a rugged off-road vehicle, specifically a modern Ford Bronco, driving on a rocky dirt trail during sunset. The vehicle is kicking up a large cloud of dust as it speeds over uneven terrain, showcasing its off-road capabilities, and on and on and on. But you get a very rich description from out-of-the-box generative AI ChatGPT. I also asked ChatGPT to tag this image. So it got the make and the model correct. It is a Ford Bronco. It was able to apply some seasonality. It's late summer. It was able to identify the color as dark green. Not exactly the Ford color, but it did identify it as dark green, and then it applied a bunch of different tags related to the actual image: off-road vehicle, SUV, dirt trail, 4x4, overlanding, trail driving, wilderness, so on and so forth. And as I said, right, old news, we can use generative AI models to tag images. But I'm sure what most of you are saying right now is, hey, haven't we solved this problem already? And by the way, Chris, I need product specific information. I have my own taxonomy. I have my own ontology. I have to apply it to these images in order for me to effectively retrieve them. Okay, we get it. We used to think, by the way, that the only way to get here was with custom models. You had to train models with your own assets, your own data, so that they could return very specific results. Or you had to take a commercial model and fine tune it, again, using your own assets, doing your own training to really tune that model. The challenge there is that training your own model is costly, it's time consuming, it requires specific skills, and getting it right isn't always that easy. So what I wanted to talk to you about today a little bit was RAG, and another method that we can use to get these product-specific, organization-specific metadata tags, results that we want, without necessarily having to go down the path of training our own model. Now, RAG's one of those terms, and RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's one of those really complex sounding terms that we tend to use around generative AI. And in reality, it's really, really simple. Basically, what RAG is, it's a set of data, a set of images that we feed to a Gen AI model along with a task or a request or a prompt in order to provide more context. And it's that context that really allows the model to give you a very relevant, a very accurate, and a very contextual response to your inquiry. So this is how we would be able to generate very specific tags related to the model trim, packaging, color options. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, one of the really cool parts about RAG is the retrieval part. And that just simply means that we use search technologies to select the images, the content, the assets, and the data that we're feeding into the model. And this means that RAG is dynamic. It means that your result set and what you're feeding to the model can change based on a specific task or activity. You're not just giving it the same set of images and data every time that you do a run. It also means that you are constantly updating that result set, giving it the most current information so that you get the most accurate responses. So here we're talking about RAG results, and you're able to correctly identify that this is a Badlands trim, that this is a Sasquatch package, and your palette specific color, right? It's eruption green metallic. Because it's a Sasquatch package, right? It's got the larger tires, it's got the beadlock capable rims. We're also able to identify here, it's got an optional hard top on it, and it has an optional heavy duty front bumper on the image. Right, so great example of how we can give more context to the model and really get the kind of results that we want back. Now, two small disclaimers here. First, I used a brand new version, ChatGPT 4.1, and as you might expect, ChatGPT is really well trained on public web images of Ford Broncos. So it actually did a good job itself in identifying and speculating that this was either a Badlands or a Wild Track model. It did identify it had the Sasquatch package on it, and it was able to identify eruption green metallic as the color. So again, depending on your use case, it may be that a commercial off-the-shelf model is going to do a really good job of tagging your assets. What it couldn't do was identify the options associated with the image. So bottom line point here, if you really want to get to product specific and leverage your taxonomy and ontology, RAG is a really powerful tool for you in order to enable those kind of results. The other thing I would emphasize here as we think about RAG and providing this context is why this is not out of the box functionality for your digital asset management system. Yes, we can reach out to publicly available models. We can do the simple kind of tagging that appears on the left. We may even get lucky with a forward image and do some of the tagging that appears on the right. But foundationally, you have to give models context in order to get these kind of very granular, accurate results. And this is why it's critical to think about either custom models or perhaps more efficiently how we use RAG to get to the kind of outcomes that you really want from these models. And my point being, there are multiple ways to get there. Now, you've done all this work on the ingestion. You've used Gen AI models to apply metadata to your assets. And what's our real goal there? Why do we need this metadata? Well, ultimately, it's about findability, right? We want to be able to more accurately find assets. We want to reduce duplication, and we want to drive more reuse of existing assets. The last thing we want to do is recreate an asset that we already have but can't find in our repository. So we talked about improving metadata. Now we're going to talk about how you can enhance your search results. And in order to do this, we're going to talk about semantic search. Now, traditional search is based on keywords. And one of the challenges with traditional search is if you don't have the right keyword, you're not going to get the right kind of result. So what semantic search does, it's really powerful technology. It leverages AI and natural language processing. And what it's able to do is really kind of intuit the meaning and the intent behind your search query. It allows it to find results that are conceptually similar. So in other words, you don't have to have the exact keyword to get the result you want. You just have to be close. And the benefits of this, there are a lot of them, right? First and foremost, it's just a much better experience. I can use natural language, type it in, kind of a Google-like search experience, and get the kind of results I want back from my digital asset management system. It also can reconcile things like vaguely worded queries or odd word usages and really get behind it to understand exactly what you're looking for. And it learns over time. So it uses machine learning. It will get more and more accurate over time. Another key aspect here beyond kind of that user experience is that this is a foundational capability for us to be able to do things like asset deduplication. So how do we find duplicates, near duplicates, derivatives inside your asset repository? Semantic search is great at that. How would we do a search based on digital rights? Semantic search is great at that. It supports a variety of advanced use cases around search. And the ultimate goal here, again, back to the top of the slide, right? We want to make it easier for your creative team to find and reuse existing digital assets that sit inside of your repository. So enough talking on my part. It is my pleasure to hand over to Mary, and Mary's going to actually show you a live demo of this. Mary?
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. All right. Let me know when you can see my screen. Looking good? Okay. So as Chris said, here is an uploaded image from Ford's website, a Ford Bronco on the beach. And like Chris said, there are going to be a lot of automated metadata fields here that populate. Very specific to Ford, very specific to the Ford Bronco. We looked at the hex code, the name of the color, things that are really important if you are deeply, working in an industry, selling a product, creating a product. We also looked at some of the things that we've created for this demo, because pretend I'm working in an ad agency getting ready to create a campaign for Ford. So to me as a marketer, it's really important that I include things in the metadata like who's the audience for this image, the seasonality, like we said, the region, and even some editorial content, taglines, etc. What else can metadata help you do? And what else does Vertisia provide based on the automated metadata? There's a few things. You are going to be able to see all of these similar images that exist in your DAM. So in this case, because we have the Ford Bronco on the beach with the water in the background, our most close image is going to be a Ford Bronco showcasing the waterfront of New York City. There's how that looks. You can see the automated metadata there as well. But you can also be able to chat with the document. So I'm pretty new to the generative AI space. I'm a new Vertisian. I just started about 6 weeks ago. And when I thought of Gen AI, I thought of chat. That's really common, the notion that generative AI is chat or is a chatbot, thanks to the popularity of ChatGPT. We know that generative AI has a lot more capabilities than chat. However, we also know that chat is really user-friendly. It's simple and you don't need any training. So the ability to chat with any of the content that lives in your DAM is really important. So there's 1,000 examples, but for me, as with my marketing hat on, if I were to use this image in a marketing campaign, who is the ideal target audience? And it's going to, again, based on the metadata, very specific to this image, it'll let me know that the ideal campaign for this image is adventure enthusiasts, outdoor lifestyle, off-road, lifestyle families, active families, etc. But the possibilities here are endless. We're talking about DAM, digital asset management. If you were to think about potentially text-based assets as well, like invoices, you could ask and query, did we ship any dangerous items as part of this invoice? So being able to gain more insights from the material that you upload into your dam is really important. And like Chris said, what's the reason behind all of this automated metadata? Well, one of the number one use cases is going to be search and findability. So to see it in action, simple, right? Again, I don't need any training. I am looking for all of my trucks that feature the forest. And I have this slider here so I can get more or less specific. Closer to 1, it gets more specific. And the really, again, amazing thing here is you can say trucks in the forest, and I'm seeing the forest, not just the trees. Same way with the beach. I could look for sand, or I could look for the desert, and the Vertisia knows the difference between just sand, so sand on the beach, or my desert-based images. So very powerful search based on those generated metadata, generated text embeddings, and helps you to then take it one step further, which Chris will explain, and then I'll demo in just a second.
Perfect. Thanks, Mary. And really love that slider feature. I do want to emphasize, by the way, for our viewers, just obviously those are all assets that sit inside of a Vertisia repository. But there is no reason why that same capability can't be extended to your particular digital asset management system, right? All we're illustrating here is the ability to apply generative AI from a search and enrichment standpoint to assets. Doesn't matter where those assets live or ultimately reside inside of your organization. So we touched on the use case of asset ingestion, enrichment, and search, and really how are we leveraging more data to more effectively reutilize our assets inside the organization. This is a set of use cases. We're going to talk about 2 here that really have to do with asset creation and also asset editing. And show you the power of how we can leverage Gen AI to modify existing assets, images in this environment. So here first, we'll talk about asset ideation. And this is another use case that came to us from one of our customers and the way that they work with their particular assets. And what we're doing with ideation is we're utilizing existing assets to visualize new concepts, new creative concepts. Right? And the goal may or may not be to produce production-ready assets, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, what are we doing? Well, we're taking a source image, in this case, the white Bronco against that mountainous background, and we're combining it with a prompt. And a prompt is just a set of instructions that you're giving to an inference model, a Gen AI model, in order to guide it in the way that it's going to generate new concepts, new ideas, and it's going to ideate. So what we've done here with the prompt is just said we want a white Ford Bronco driving down a 2-lane highway in the Texas Hill Country. It's springtime, blue bonnets, wildflowers are blooming, and it's mid-morning, and there are longhorns in the distance behind a wire fence. And what you can see, and this is an example Mary's going to show you in a second in real life, but what you can see is that the model's done a great job of generating a sample set of images that incorporate the white Ford Bronco and a variety of different coming and going angles on the vehicle, all going down a 2-lane road with the blue bonnets and wildflowers blooming and longhorns in the background. Now, somewhat humorously, I do want to point out on the bottom left, the image that the model has not put the longhorn behind the fence. It's actually put it in the middle of the road, and we may be seeing the advanced moments of an automobile crash here. But foundationally, it's a good point, right? It's an illustration of the fact that Gen AI models don't always get it right. And we strongly encourage human in the loop because sometimes some of the concepts, some of the examples that are generated aren't exactly what you've prompted for. So it's good to review these outputs and results as you go through it. But what you're seeing here is a use case where a user can just use a very simple prompt and a source image or set of source images to generate all sorts of different new ideas and concepts based on what they've specified in that prompt. It's a really powerful combination of DAM, RAG, and generative AI. So you're using your asset repository to quickly search for, retrieve a set of source images, right? You're utilizing RAG, and this is a more advanced use case, but a great example of how you can leverage not just those source images, but other contexts. So you might have brand guidelines, you might have IP or image usage rights or policies associated with different images, and you might even have some localization requirements that you want to feed to the model along with those source images and your prompt to really guide how it ideates. I also want to emphasize the intent of this is not to replace your creative talent, right? This is not about automating the work that your creatives do. It's really about fueling that creative process, which is hence the title for our webinar today, right? We want to make it easier for creative teams to quickly and easily explore new concepts, new ideas. I also mentioned earlier, you got to think about whether or not these assets are production ready, right? It depends on the asset type. It depends on the medium. These images are pretty good, but we find sometimes Gen AI models struggle with humans and inserting humans into images, and you get some odd distortions. Mary was running some simulations earlier today, and we got a two-headed longhorn in one of the images. So it's very possible for the models to hallucinate. It's very possible for some of the assets not to be production quality. But the key thing here, again, and for this particular customer that we built this capability for, was about ideation. It was not about production. So they still had to go create the artwork. They had to go create the asset, but they knew where to begin. And they had the concept and idea in mind to then begin exploring the new asset rather than starting from a blank sheet of paper. Now, here's a similar and related use case, but applied very, very differently. So let's talk a little bit about asset localization. And when I say localization, a lot of people kind of go, translation, right? And a lot of people view that as very synonymous. So first and foremost, we can have a really good and long debate about the accuracy of Gen AI for translation, right? Taking text in different images and assets and translating it into different languages. In fact, some of our customers have found that it's less efficient than just simply, doing the effort, making the human translation and getting it right the first time. But for those of you who work with creative assets, visual images, and things of that nature, you know that localization is about a lot more than just translation, right? We got to think about our target audience. We got to think about demographics. We're going to have cultural or region-specific appropriateness we need to think about. That may apply to dress, that may apply to certain religious norms, other things that you need to consider as you globalize images and use them in different geographies around the world. So that boils down to the content of your images, what colors you use. You need to think about your settings, your landmarks, your backgrounds. You may even need to think about local, legal, or regulatory requirements in how you localize different assets. So what we've done on the left here, again, very simple example, right? But shows you the power of the technology. We've taken that same source image of the white Bronco. And in this case, with our prompt, we've specified, hey, we want a silver Ford Bronco. We want it driving through a country road in the French wine region of Burgundy. Grapevines, narrow road, vibrant red poppies, purple lavender flowers, and we want the background dotted with stone chateaus and farmhouses. Okay, and what we've been able to do is, one, change the color of the Bronco, so you get a silver Bronco in this image instead of the white source image, and then two, place it on that winding French country road in wine country. So good example of how we can modify an image or an existing asset, or take a source asset and place it in a completely different, perhaps localized geography for an ad campaign or other marketing use case. Now, What I wanted to talk about, though, was we can go further than this. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. It shows you the capabilities of the technology, but we can make localization agentic. We can use agents to localize assets when we upload them into the repository. And this is one of those examples where you can go as little or as far as you want to with the technology. So first, let me define agents, because everybody defines it differently, and it's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot. From our perspective, just think about an agent as a AI-powered system that can perform different tasks independently and can adapt to changing circumstances. So to a certain extent, it can figure out how to do different things based on different inputs. But essentially here, it's an automated workflow. It's an AI-powered workflow that applies Gen AI as you load assets into your repository, and it can leverage your localization policies and guidelines. So if you have a set of policies for a specific geography about what needs to be or not be in an image and how it needs to be properly localized for use in a particular region or geography, the model can actually utilize that information. And this is where, I mean, it's kind of a sliding scale. What do you want to do? First and foremost, we can go through a set of assets as they're uploaded and determine whether or not they're appropriate for a specific locality, right? So very simple use case. Hey, here are my policies, here are my guidelines. Let's look at these images. Do they meet those policies or guidelines or not? And then you end up with a subset of images that, for example, you can use in France for marketing, ad campaigns, other purposes like that. Now we could take it a step further and look at the non-compliant images and then identify where they are not consistent with your policies and guidelines and give you guidance associated with that. And we could even take it a step further, as we've kind of illustrated here, and you could utilize Gen AI to generate compliant, right, properly localized versions of assets for a particular locality or geography. So the agents really can do anything from simply identifying non-compliant assets to fully localizing those assets if you want them to. And again, you've got to think about how production ready those images are and the final assets are. But the point is, this is one of those use cases that can be a tremendous bottleneck for organizations and very difficult and very time consuming for creatives, and isn't particularly interesting sometimes for creatives, and where we can go and automate a lot of the heavy lifting here. If nothing else, help them identify images that do need to be properly localized or adapted. So with that, I am going to hand back to Mary, and she's going to give you another demo.
This is the fun part. Okay. I'm going to go through different ways to prompt your models and what you get in terms of generative AI ideation. So let's stick with that Texas Hill Country use case because it's close to home for me. I'm based in Austin, Texas. While that generates, it's really quick, but I am going to take a few minutes to talk about the model because that's really important, right? So in this case, in our environment, Vertesia, I am using the model Imagine from Google. Other models on the market are Amazon's Nova Canvas, Adobe Firefly, DALL-E. There are a lot of models on the market. And just one second, I'm going to refresh because it doesn't need to take this long. Why are we talking about the models and why is that important? Well, if you use a tool like Vertesia, will not be locked into a model. You will be able to, whatever model is open and on the market, you'll be able to use that. And that's important because, again, if you choose one model and move forward with that, you are going to be bound by potentially the constraints of that model. If you have a more open, if you use a tool like Vertesia that integrates with all the different models on the market that are open, you have that flexibility with you as well. Okay, so I am using Google Imagine only because it's a more photorealistic. Amazon's Nova Canvas is more stylized. And here's my example, right? I have my white Ford Bronco rolling through the hill country, and we have a few safety concerns. As you can see, we have my Longhorns that are in the middle of the road, which does happen at times here in real life, but that's nothing that we want to put in a marketing campaign. So I'm going to make a little bit of an adjustment. I will reuse this prompt. Just make a little amend and go ahead and regenerate an image from there. This prompt, a simple, short text-based prompt, was just something that I thought of. So I was preparing for this demo of obviously using what I know. So what's beautiful this time of year? Our Texas bluebonnets, and of course, our Texas Longhorns. And as you can see, the model does a pretty good job. We have our Bronco, we have the Longhorns in the distance. So far, I'm not seeing any two-headed Longhorns, and this definitely looks like Texas. So there's an example of using a text-based prompt to generate images. Now I want to show you how you can generate images using other images. I do need a little inspiration, and in this case, I'm going to select 3 very distinct looking images. One of them being the mountains, one of them being the desert, and then one of them being the night sky. I've selected my images, and what I'm now going to ask the system to do is generate a prompt based on the images. And here's a good time to talk about tokens. So each time that you are calling the models, asking the models to do something, you're using tokens. And you might think, well, doesn't that get expensive quickly? Tokens are cents on the dollar. So in this scenario, no, it does not get expensive. So it's virtually unlimited ideation. So having my 3 very distinct images, 2 use Broncos, 1 uses a Ford F-150, all feature different landscapes, times of day, etc. I have my generated prompt. So a cinematic shot of a rugged adventure vehicle in an otherworldly landscape, combining dramatic natural elements, towering peaks, desert terrain, star-filled sky. The scene features a modern SUV with off-road modifications, and we have a dirt trail, atmospheric lighting, and we want to make sure the vehicle and the natural backdrop are showcased. I am going to just add modern 2025 Ford Bronco, since that's what we're working on. And now we're going to see how it goes. This is where it can get fun with what the models are going to do based on this prompt. And like I said, I'm sticking with the Google model to get that photorealistic style. And as you can see, in this case, it is generated a single image, 4 images, but each featuring 1 image with the Ford Bronco at night. And if this is what I want, that's amazing. I'll show a few other examples, but that's a way that you can let the system create a prompt for you based on what's already existing. So a lot of different capabilities there. I just wanted to show you what other flavors that could look like. I have done this a few times in preparing for the webinar. And so there are times when I've coached the models a little bit more, saying, I want 2 distinct images, or a triptych, or a tetrapic. And then my favorite, we think it almost looks like a sci-fi film or a sci-fi movie poster, where you kind of have them all converge into one. Different flavors, again, of what the model will come up with, but all of them using images to generate the prompt. Okay, one more flavor for you all. We're going to focus on the French wine country, and I'll tell you why. It's kind of funny. So do I need some inspiration? Yes, I do. I'm going to pull my beautiful Ford Bronco rolling through the Texas Hill Country. And once again, I'm going to ask the system to create the prompt for me. And give it a little bit of time. My modern silver Ford Bronco. I'm going to copy and paste this. And once again, I'm going to chat with the system because it's easy and it's fun. And I have a question and a command for the system. And I'm going to say, can you please adapt this prompt to reflect the French wine country? And copy and paste the prompt that just was created. The reason why is because I have heard on pretty good authority that the Texas Hill Country and the French wine country are actually very similar in terms of the makeup of the soil and the rocky soil. But I think anyone who knows wine is going to say, I challenge that because the Texas wine and the French wine are not the same. But that's kind of where I got my thought from. So we're going to see what a modern Ford Bronco really does look like as it's rolling through the hills of Burgundy. And in this case, we're not seeing bluebonnets, but we're seeing lavender and we're seeing sunflowers. So it looks quite beautiful. Somewhere I'd certainly love to go. I am just going to do one more thing. I'm going to jump into this particular image and I'm going to make a few adjustments. Can you make it sunset? And I'm going to just modify the image that we have here. And this is important to point out that there are no character limits when you go to prompt Vertesia. Some other models on the market, you are limited in the number of characters for your prompt, be that 400, 200, 100, etc., which can make it hard because then you're thinking about how do I get my prompt into this small character limit, when in reality, right, generative AI is supposed to make your life easier. I know that there's talk about needing to be a prompt engineer, etc. But when you have an unlimited character count for your prompt, it makes your life easier. Now, aside from the interesting, I don't know, hatchback here, the sunset looks beautiful and it does look a bit like a dreamy situation. So there is my fun, simple example of localization, taking my image into a different place. And Chris, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thanks for giving us some real life examples of non-production ready assets that are being produced by the model. Mary, while I'm picking up again, I had a question and I'll just throw it out here. Are the results more likely to have errors if it's a longer tailed query versus a shorter tailed query? Does the length of the prompt, for example, increase the likelihood of getting hallucinations?
I have seen longer prompts do produce better results, giving the models more direction. Like, for example, with the longhorns, where you said, I want an image with longhorns, it might put them on the road. But if you give it a little more direction, which does increase the prompt length, yes, I've seen the queries that are longer, more directive, have better results.
Got it. And so no correlation necessarily between the prompt length and the actual quality of the output. And if we knew why they hallucinated and when they hallucinated, we'd do much more work to make sure they don't do it in the future. All right. So just a quick transition back, and we'll try to get you to Q&A very, very quickly. Figured we'd be running short on time here. Won't spend much time on the case study. Just wanted to emphasize again, right? These are real capabilities that our customers are using. In this case, customers, very large asset repository, adding 2,000 assets a day. Of course, they got savings in terms of how they ingest and automate that ingestion process and applying metadata. But more importantly, really this use case was about improving findability, accelerating their art creation timelines, right? And it's about ultimately facilitating their business. We also did some work on search from a sanitation standpoint. And this is actually the particular customer that shared the ideation use case with us. More data here from IDC, but what I wanted to emphasize here very simply is there are a lot of potential use cases for generative AI and digital asset management. Some of the ones illustrated in orange we kind of talked about already today, but there are some related to creative workflows like next best action, guided workflows, and there are some related to asset performance. Can I predict asset performance based on the new asset? Can I detect unusual access to different assets related more to rights management and security? And ultimately, can I get better insights into customers? So a couple of things here. One, yes, there are a lot of use cases. Two, it's not realistic to expect that you're going to get all of these capabilities out of the box from your digital asset management system provider. They're just too diverse. We've talked about some of the need for contextualization. It's very, very likely that if you want some of these capabilities and the value that they bring for your organization, you're going to need to invest to build some of these applications yourself. This is why our customers have taken more of a platform approach to this. It's greater reuse, greater repeatability, and as I said earlier, no reason you cannot plug this into your existing DAM system. It's very simple, very straightforward. Now, I've showed you a lot of use cases. We usually get the question of, oh my God, where do I start? And what we like to do with customers, very simple quadrant here, and really help them kind of map these different use cases in terms of the amount of effort taken to get them right and the value that they bring to the organization. And very, very simply, start with the ones on the left, particularly the high value, low effort use cases, right? Those are no-brainers. Or the ones on the bottom left, which is just low-hanging fruit, easy to do, bring value to your organization. And then as you get further along, you can progress to the more difficult use cases. This is not prescriptive. These answers are not the same for everyone. So typically what we do, and we offer a free workshop for customers, sit down, go through your use cases, even develop a proof of concept application for you, show you how quick and easy it is. Typically what we find, people kind of progress from left to right, ingestion and retrieval, to creation, editing, reuse, and ultimately insight, analysis, and predictions. And again, we are a generative AI platform, very, very conversant in the digital asset management space, and we would love to help you with us. So if you want more information, you can visit us at vertisiahq.com. But hopefully that got us quickly to the Q&A portion. And before I hand off to Con, I just want to say on behalf of Mary and myself, thank you for your time and attention today. Really appreciated the opportunity to present to you. Con?
Hey, thank you, Chris and Mary, for the great presentation. First question is, does Vertisia work with all dams on the market, and does that include homegrown systems?
Mary, you want to hit that one?
The quick, simple answer would be yes. So your DAM system, if it can be integrated to, Vertisia can work with it. And that does include homegrown system. We have plenty of customers who want to integrate with their homegrown solutions and augment them with generative AI, and it's something that we can do.
How adaptable is the Gen AI mediated creative process? i.e., can this be easily used in the science, tech, and engineering industry for marketing asset generation?
Absolutely. So we not only do image-based assets, we also do text-based assets. A lot of our customers use this for everything from PowerPoints to one-sheets to white papers and things of that nature. And again, context matters, right? So foundationally, it's the same, but what we're doing there is just specifying different types of output based on different types of input. And the beauty there with RAG, right, you can load previous blog postings, other writings, so that the model actually gets to understand your style of communication, things like that, and is able to mimic it very, very effectively.
Okay, another great question from the audience. Do users have the flexibility to choose which AI model is used for tasks like image generation or other Gen AI powered features within the DAM system?
We love that question because the answer is yes. And that's really important. Having a solution that is flexible, that allows you to choose the generative AI model that works for you and not be locked into one system, I think is something that sets Vertesia apart on the market. And it's a really powerful capability because, again, when we talked about character limitation and we talked about prompt engineering, you aren't beholden to a model or a system. You can use the model that works best for your use case.
Yeah, Con, out of the box, we support 10 different inference providers, literally hundreds of different models. And the one thing that we've learned kind of across our experience is that there is a right model for every task. So what we want to do is make it really easy for users to experiment and compare results between models so that they're getting the optimal output that they need.
All right. So the next one is a big question for everybody who's working with AI. How do we stop it from using our data?
Oh, love that question. I'll jump on this one, Mary. So there is so number one, models absolutely use your data, right? We talked about RAG, we talked about loading source images. You have to give models something to work with in order to kind of get those results back. So they are using your data in that respect. But what people are really asking is, how do I keep models from training on my data, right? I have proprietary data and I don't want to train models based on it. And this is a common misconception with commercial models. Commercial models have training models where, somebody like OpenAI is working on developing the next version of ChatGPT and training. And then they have their actual inference production models. And those models are not trainable. So they are not training on your data. The exception is, and what everybody cites is when I go to the ChatGPT website and I load information into it and it's training on that. But in terms of when we plug into different inference models, they do not train on your data.
Okay. And one last question. Where can we begin if we want to incorporate a solution like this?
It's a nice question, Don. Again, I think Chris does a really good job of explaining crawl, walk, run, right? Look at your DAM today. What might you be struggling with? Where could generative AI help in filling the gaps, whether that's with metadata enrichment, findability, localization, generative ideation. There are a lot of different use cases for generative AI, which honestly is why I think it can be so mysterious, is because it can seem so huge. In general, generative AI can just seem like, okay, well, it can do everything. Well, no, let's get specific. What can it really do for your organization? What can it really do for your DAM platform? And start there. We also offer workshops for this question. It's like, where do I begin when I need to think about generative AI, integrating it into my system? What kind of people do I need to have involved? Do they need specific skill sets? Because generative AI is relatively new and it's changing so quickly, it can be hard to know where to begin. But I would say first, ask yourself the question, what do we need our DAM to do? What do we need our DAM to be better at? And then generative AI can help fill those gaps.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris and Mary. I really enjoyed the presentation. That's all the time we have for today. If we didn't get to your question, we will be sure to pass it along to Vertesia. On behalf of MarTech, I want to thank Chris and Mary for the great presentation and everyone in our audience for attending this webinar. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much.